Hey guys, in today's video I bring you an unbelievable and chilling story. Let's meet Ezekiel Zeke Marlowe, a former police officer who died during an explosion and had a near-death experience that changed everything he believed. On the other side, he encountered a radiant presence who revealed himself as Yeshua, and it was in this encounter that Zeke was revealed to a secret about God that no one had ever told him. What happened next shocked his family, his community, and even his colleagues in uniform. So leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. And take the opportunity now to comment below which city you are watching this video in. Let's see how far this message will reach. Now get ready, because this journey will touch your soul. I was born on a cold winter morning in Erie, Pennsylvania, the only child of Samuel Marlowe, a respected Pentecostal minister, and Miriam, a dedicated homemaker and amateur musician. I grew up listening to the steady sound of my mother's guitar and my father's impassioned speech about the holiness of God. My life revolved around rigorous routines, waking up before the sun to pray, studying biblical passages, fasting on holy days, and participating in weekly services where my father preached the need for absolute obedience to divine commandments. Even when other children played on the sunny streets of Erie, I dedicated myself to memorizing verses and completing household chores designated as proofs of devotion. Every decision, from what to wear to what to think, was measured against a standard that I believed to be the essence of divine truth. There was no room for doubt. My faith was unshakable, shaped by the fear of disappointing God and failing as the pastor's son. Even though I was proud of this identity, there was a silent anguish that I could never name, an emptiness that filled my days with a sense of obligation but not true peace. My decision to join the Erie Police Force was born out of a sense of duty that seemed to align perfectly with my vision of divine service. The night I received my badge, I felt a mixture of pride and responsibility, as if God had called me to not only protect my community, but also reinforce the moral order that my father had always preached. The first few months at the department were filled with long shifts patrolling dark streets and industrial neighborhoods. I remember the metallic smell of damp concrete, headlights reflecting in puddles of rain, and the distant sound of sirens that mingled with the biting wind off Lake Erie. Each approach to suspects required total vigilance but also aroused silent doubts in me. Why so much violence? Why were young lives cut short by heartless decisions? One night, while investigating a shooting outside a downtown bar, I found Noam, my childhood friend, lying on the floor, motionless, blood pooling around his head. The sound of the screams, the empty look in Noam's eyes, and the pungent smell of gunpowder burned themselves into my soul. The moment his last breath died away, I felt my faith tremble like never before. I spent days reliving that scene, questioning the purpose of all prayer and fasting if God allowed the innocent to die so young. The religious routine, once a comfort, began to sound empty and mechanical. Every verse he recited seemed to echo without meaning. The conviction that sustained my life began to dissolve, replaced by a restlessness that gnawed at my core. It was at this point that I realized that protecting and serving, my top priorities, no longer answered the questions that arose within me. I continued to fulfill my duties, but my heart was searching for something that transcended order and discipline, something that would fill the void left by the loss of Noam. The morning after Noam's funeral, I was assigned to accompany Detective Marcus Green on a routine investigation, a possible explosive device found in an abandoned truck near the port. The sun had barely risen when we arrived at the location, fine mist hovering over the asphalt, and a heavy silence enveloped the air. "Zeke, stay behind me," ordered Marcus, his voice firm but without hostility. His gaze carried experience and skepticism, characteristics I admired even as I questioned my own faith. We slowly approached the truck. I could feel my heart pounding, each step amplifying the rumble of thoughts echoing in my mind. As I opened the rear compartment door, my foot stepped on an exposed wire. In an instant, everything exploded. The sucker impact threw me against the nearest metal wall with enough force to knock the air from my lungs. I saw Marcus being thrown backwards as flames and shrapnel danced in the air like cutting blades. A searing burning shot through my chest, the most intense pain I had ever experienced, followed by an absolute emptiness that swallowed my consciousness. In the next second, I felt my body lose weight and the crushing pressure of the explosion disappeared. I was swallowed by a darkness so complete it seemed to envelop every shred of existence. There was no pain, no fear, just infinite silence. And then, in a sudden flash, everything changed. The emptiness was replaced by an indescribable luminosity, a golden light that seemed to pulse with a life of its own, enveloping me like a warm, weightless hug. There was no sound. The silence was absolute, yet filled with a presence that I could feel reverberating in every fiber of my being. My physical body had ceased to exist, and the sensation of floating was as natural as breathing, although breathing was no longer necessary. In front of me, a figure shrouded in radiance appeared, so radiant that my eyes, or what was left of them, couldn't focus on details. Still, I knew who he was before any thought formed in my mind. Yeshua. There was no judgment in his gaze, just a deep, unconditional love that penetrated every defense I had built up throughout my life. In moments that seemed eternal, I experienced a complete overhaul of my existence. Every memory, every word spoken or unspoken, every act of compassion or judgment flashed before me simultaneously. Not like a movie, but like a lived truth, felt in my heart. I saw myself pray mechanically, obey out of fear, push people away, with my spiritual pride. I felt the pain I caused others with my rigidity and my arrogance. Without uttering a single word, a clear and indelible message was conveyed. You knew the law, but you did not know the heart. It wasn't an accusation, but revelation, the gentle, irrevocable dismantling of everything I believed to be true. And then, as if it were a confirmation sealed in the core of my being, absolute certainty came. Yeshua is the promised Messiah, the way to full and true life. There was no doubt. It was a conviction as solid as the light that surrounded me. In a final flash of understanding and peace, I felt myself pulled back, the glow fading as the weight of physical existence approached, ready to welcome me back. When my senses returned, I was greeted by a chorus of high-pitched beeps and rushing voices, a chaotic noise that ripped me from the absolute peace of that other plane. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Every muscle, every bone felt compressed by an invisible force, as if my body was being reassembled piece by piece. I tried to breathe in, but the air felt thick, like my lungs had forgotten how to work. I felt the cold catheter entering my vein, the sharp touch of doctors' hands trying to stabilize my vital signs. Weak pulse, unstable pressure, I heard someone say, but the words sounded distant, muffled by a continuous ringing in my forcing on my vision blurred as I struggled to understand where reality ended and the echo of that divine encounter began. For a moment, everything seemed unrecognizable. The white hospital ceiling, the worried faces around me, the metallic smell of dried blood mixed with disinfectant. In a flash of lucidity, I recognized Marcus, his face marked with anguish, holding my hand tightly. His eyes searched for answers that I still didn't have words to offer, but all I could feel was the peace that remained in my chest, a faint but unquenchable flame that told me I had been changed forever. When my breathing finally stabilized, I knew that returning didn't just mean a physical restart, but the beginning of a painful journey of reconciliation between two realities, that of that hospital and that of the truth that now burned in my soul. When I shared my experience with the medical team, I was met with incredulous looks and subdued murmurs. Words like hallucination and brain trauma were thrown around as plausible explanations. When my family was called to the hospital, the encounter was devastating. My father entered the room with firm steps, the austere expression that I knew so well. "Zeke, what are you saying?" he asked, his voice full of disappointment. I reported, with every detail intact in my memory, the encounter with Yeshua, the review of my life and the certainty that had been granted to me. His features hardened like stone. "This is blasphemy," my father declared, walking away as if my testimony were poison. My mother burst into tears, unable to reconcile the son she had known with this unrecognizable man. Rebecca, my sister, hesitated for a moment. Her eyes reflected compassion, but then looked away and left the room without saying a word. When I returned home a few days later, I found the silence more piercing than any scream. The walls seemed to pulse with absence. My belongings had been removed from the room, my clothes collected, my name avoided in family conversations. The once warm church community now treated me like I was a pest. Messages on social media accused me of betraying the faith. Local pastors spoke from pulpits about the need to protect the congregation from false doctrines, without ever mentioning my name but directing each word to my heart. At the police department, I received notice that I would be relieved of my duties pending a psychological evaluation. Marcus tried to intercede on my behalf, but even he seemed unsure how to defend something that transcended all logic. I spent weeks sleeping on a distant friend's couch, consumed by feelings of abandonment. Each day was marked by a deafening silence, the sound of my own breathing echoing in empty rooms and the painful certainty that, upon returning from death, I had lost everything that had defined me until then. Over the next few months, my search for meaning became urgent and obsessive. With no family, no church, and no career, I found refuge in the ancient pages of the Bible, but this time not as a mechanical duty, but as a student eager to understand every word in the light of the truth that had been revealed to me. I started with Isaiah 53, reading and rereading that text about the suffering servant until each syllable echoed in my heart as confirmation of what had lived beyond death. On silent nights, I underlined verses, wrote frantic notes in a worn notebook, and prayed differently, not to fulfill obligations but to seek intimacy with the one who revealed himself as pure love. Little by little, I organized a small group of friends, people also marked by doubts and spiritual questions, and together we studied passages that were previously ignored by my old religious tradition. Rebecca timidly reappeared, drawn by the genuine change she saw in me. Our meetings were full of heartfelt conversations, shared tears, and the comfort of knowing I was not alone on this journey. Marcus, despite his skepticism, started attending some meetings, not out of conviction, but out of loyalty and compassion. With each text analyzed, I felt myself rebuilding not only my faith, but my own identity. I learned that the essence of Yeshua's message was not rules or rituals, but the transformation of the heart, a love that forgives, frees, and heals. This new understanding did not come without a struggle. Doubts persisted, moments of fear when imagining what else I would lose, and the constant pain of knowing that I would never be accepted back into the world I had left. But there was something more powerful than all these losses, the inexplicable peace that rested in my chest even in the midst of external chaos. My study evolved into intimate prayer, and my devotion into humble service to others, offering companionship to Erie's marginalized, sharing my story with anyone who would listen. And so, between sacred pages and deep conversations, I forged a faith that did not depend on human approval, but on the indelible certainty of having found the true heart of God, the one that once revealed to me in the light that life is worth much more than any belief based on fear. The climax of my transformation came when I was officially discharged from the Erie Police Department, not with bitterness, but with the ease of someone finally freed from invisible chains. Without a uniform, without a salary, and without recognition, I returned to Jerusalem. Oops, my real home was now Erie, but I felt like a foreigner even among the streets I knew. I lost my permanent address and started living in borrowed rooms, or in the small room I managed to rent in a humble neighborhood near the port. But there was something powerful in every step I took. The conviction that I had not lost everything but had gained something incomparable. Instead of titles, he carried peace. Instead of security, it had purpose. Each gesture, helping a homeless person, reading the Bible with a lonely neighbor, praying for strangers, became a tangible expression of that truth I received in the light. Family rejection became a daily reminder that following revealed truth would always require courage and sacrifice. My father never forgave me, My sister remained distant at many times. The Pentecostal community never took me back. But I emerged. As someone who had experienced death, not just physical death, but the death of old rule-based convictions, and was reborn into a life based on unwavering love. Today, my story is not about loss, but about gain. The near-death experience was the portal that destroyed my old identity and gave me a new foundation, an intimate relationship with God through Yeshua. Each day is lived no longer under the weight of fear, but in the freedom of those who know that true life begins where fear ends. And if you ask me if it was worth losing everything, I will answer without hesitation. Yes, because in the light of that encounter, I discovered the essence of who I really am, and the certainty that nothing, not even death, can separate me from that eternal love. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.